بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتابه الكريم لا تجعل مع الله إلها آخر فتقعد مذموما مخذولا وقضى ربك ألا تعبدوا إلا إياه وبالوالدين إحسانا إما يبلغن عندك الكبر أحدهما أو كلاهما فلا تقل لهما أف ولا تنهرهما وقل لهما قولا كريما صدق الله العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. وبعد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي آمين يا رب العالمين. Alhamdulillah, brothers and sisters in Islam, we had the privilege of praying Salatul Isha with congregation, with Jama'ah, whose reward is multiplied many times by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is a Saturday night, as you know, people will be busy in their ibadat, in their family lives. But Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen a few to stay behind after the Salatul Isha. And this will be like a ribat fi sabilillah. It will be like as if you are guarding the boundaries or the borders of the Dar al-Islam. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he says in a hadith which we all know, that a group of people do not stay behind in a masjid or somewhere in order to proclaim His Majesty, His name, until a group of malaika, angels, come round and gather around these people. And they ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though He knows what they want, He asks the malaika, what do these people want, what are they doing? And they reply to Him, Jalla wa ala, that they are there for your gratitude, to seek your forgiveness, and to glorify you in all their lives. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells them, for this, tell them that I have forgiven their sins, and I am pleased with them. And one of the things which I mentioned yesterday, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being pleased with you is something great. And it's something which cannot be exchanged for anything else in this dunya. And one of the ways He is pleased with you is, like I mentioned, the ayah in the Holy Quran, in Surah Bani Israel, Surah Al-Israa. And this ayah is a Meccan ayah. It was revealed prior to the hijrah of the Prophet ﷺ to Madinatul Munawwara. And it has many instructions in these few ayahs. There's about 6 or 7 ayahs, which I will be going through very, very briefly in the next half an hour. But the ayahs, the first ayah which I recited is really the basis. It is the foundation for what comes next. And the ayah is لا تجعل مع الله إلها آخر فتقعد مذموما مخذولا. Do not set up any other partners, any other gods beside Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise, what will happen? You will become humiliated and helpless. You will become madhmoom and makhdhul. And following this ayah in Surah Bani Israel, the ayahs pertaining to the rights of parents will start. There are other ayahs which are mentioned in other surahs, but this is the most comprehensive few ayahs which relate to the rights of parents, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first He tells us that we must worship Him Jalla wa ala. Your Lord has decreed وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُ إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. And this is a pattern you see, that where Allah tells us to worship Him, straight after He tells us, obey your parents, be good to your parents. This is something you will see in many, many surahs of the Holy Quran. And then further He tells us how to be good to them. He didn't just say to us that be good to them, and that's it, He left it at that. He says, do not worship anyone but Him, be good to your parents, i.e. when they reach the age of elderness, when they become old age with you, do not say to them even an uff, a fi, or a why, or a how. Neither should you chastise them, or neither should you speak to them out with dishonesty or with dishonor, and rather honor them in your speaking and also with your dealing with them. وَقُلْ لَهُمَا قَوْلًا كَرِيمًا. Speak with them with honorable words. Now, the following ayahs one after the other, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about 6-7 points He describes to us, that prior to the migration, the hijrah, that what should the community be ready for. And I see this really when you look at the events, how they unfold in Medina, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is preparing the ground for a good community, for a healthy community. The first thing He says is not pray your salat, pay your zakat, do your hajj. What's the first thing He mentioned is that be dutiful to your parents, i.e., respect them, make sure you look after them. And this is not just talking about Muslim parents. Don't forget the companions had parents who were not Muslim at that time. So what do you think the Prophet ﷺ said to them? Did he say to them, deal with them harshly, they're not Muslim, do whatever you want with them? No, rather this ayah is a general command for all, whether they are Muslims or non-Muslims. And this is something I'm going to try to go through in the next few minutes, is that how do we firstly attain the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through fulfilling the rights of the parents. We all heard the story of Uwais al-Qarni. Uwais al-Qarni is somebody who never met the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, yet the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam knew about him. Why did he know about him? How did he know about him? It was through many things, but one of them, that he stayed behind serving his mother instead of coming to Medina to meet the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This was one of the reasons the Prophet heard about him. He was from the tribe of Qarr in Yemen. And it is said that when he heard about the battle of Uhud, and he heard that the Prophet ﷺ lost one of his teeth, what did he do? He took all his teeth, he broke all his teeth out of the love for the Prophet ﷺ. He wanted to come and meet him in Medina, but what was stopping him was his elderly mother. So the Prophet ﷺ tells Umar radiallahu ta'ala and Ali that you will meet this person. And when you meet him, what do? Give him my salam. So we are sending salam on the Prophet ﷺ. He's saying to them, you send my salam to him, this person. So there's a long narration. Ali radiallahu ta'ala and Umar radiallahu, they go to Hajj and they call, every year they're going to Hajj, they're calling for this person, always. And sometimes, they respond, other times they come back disappointed. And one year they managed to find him. And when they found him, they were asking him, what are the characteristics that you have? That's so much so that the Prophet ﷺ inquired about you. He said, I'm just a simple person, I'm a farmer, I look after my sheep, and I have an elderly mother who I used to look after, and that's about it. And he says, the Prophet ﷺ spoke about you so great. He said that if this person asks for forgiveness for the whole of the ummah, it will be accepted. And when he gives an oath, he keeps to it. And if he was to, give sadaqah, charity, it will be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by him. So what did the Prophet say to them? Ask him to make dua for the ummah of this Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is what he did. He stood and he was really amazed that how come someone like the Prophet of Islam ask about me? What's the reason? And this is one of the reasons, the respect that he gave to his mother. And there are many examples like this in the seerah, but this was one which really it really makes a big impact, especially when you want to do something and you have your mother and she's not allowing you. Say for instance, if you need to go to Hajj and your mother is sick, your mother is ill, the ulama, they say you prefer to stay with her, not to go, rather than completing the farad of Hajj. You rather stay back and serve her till her last breath or your last breath. Carrying on, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in this ayah, so this is part of the Saturday Tafseer session which we have, and really I'm going to try and make it as open as possible to you all. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He doesn't just talk about the parents, He actually talks about, when He mentions the rights of the parents, it's also the other side, the rights of the children as well, that how we should look after our children, because they both work in tandem. We cannot just say to our children, be good to your parents, and then say to the parents, don't be good to your children. We should say to the parents, also be good to your children. And how do you be good with them? This is something which we will explain in the next few ayahs, inshallah. So prior to this hijrah, there was something which followed in this ayah. وَاخْفِضْ لَهُمَا جَنَاحَ الظُّلِّ مِنَ الرَّحْمَةِ وَقُلْ رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا. So while they are still alive, you serve them. But when they have passed away, then you make this dua for them that, oh Allah, show mercy to them as they nurtured me when I was small. And also this dua could be recited while they are still alive as well. But more importantly, you make dua for them that you show Allah show mercy towards them too, the same way that they showed mercy towards me while I was still in my cradle, I was still a baby, I couldn't even feed myself, etc. You still remember those days. And then when we make this dua to Him, Jalla wa Ala, He knows what's in our hearts. رَبُّكُمْ أَعْلَمُ مَا فِي نُفُوسِكُمْ. If you are righteous, He's telling us, He straight away gave us the jawab, the answer to this dua, that He knows what's in our hearts. If you are righteous, if you are salih, then indeed He will give you what you ask for, i.e. the repentance, the mercy, and He will be there for you in the time of need. This is what He says in the next ayah. This means that He knows whether you are just saying it for the sake of saying it, whether it is just lip service, whether you actually mean it from the bottom of your heart. And don't realize in this ayah Allah is talking about them when they reach old age. But it doesn't mean that when they are young that you don't respect them. Rather, more importance is given when they are at the age of say 60, 70 or 80. This is why Allah tells us that when they reach the kibr, then you need to really wise up and you need to rectify your affairs. And this is really a wake-up call for everyone. I mean, how many of us have their parents still alive here? Put your hands up. Just make a quick survey. So you have, mashallah, a few of you still have your parents alive. So really this is a nasiha for you guys that, make the most while they are still with you. Because when they have passed away, this dua will only be the thing you can do for them, or you can do some sadaqah jariyah for them, or you can respect their friends who are still alive. This is also from the sunnah, that you visit their friends who were in their company, etc. So Allah tells us in verse 26, so after mentioning the rights of the parents and the children and keeping this clear account with them, the next thing He mentions, brothers and sisters in Islam, is that give support to who? To your family. So when He talks about your mother and father, what comes next is your brothers and sisters. وَآتِ ذَا الْقُرْبَى حَقَّهُ وَالْمِسْكِينَ. So give those who are close to you their rights, and the miskeen, those who are needy. وَبِنَ السَّبِيلَ, and those who are traveling, the wayfarers. وَلَا تُبَذِّرْ تَبْذِيرًا, and do not squander, do not waste your wealth. Do not waste your wealth wastefully. There are 4 commands given here. So one is not to waste your wealth, and also to give out of your wealth to who? To your family, to the wayfarer, to the miskeen, and those who have a right upon you. Allah Ta'ala tells us then, firstly, why we shouldn't waste our wealth. It's common sense that if the money, when it comes to you and it goes, in a split second, there will be no barakah. But He tells us really something which is worse than that, and that is, إِنَّ الْمُبَذِّرِينَ كَانُوا إِخْوَانَ. Those who spend wastefully are the brothers of the shaitan, and shaitan is always ever ungrateful to his Lord. He is always ungrateful to his Lord. This is something that one of the characteristics that you have is that when you have money, you never be grateful for it, and you always say that this is not enough. There's a great hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that if Ibn Adam had one mountain of gold in his possession, or one mountain of wealth, he would always long for the other mountain, and if he was given the other mountain, he would always ask for the third. This is human nature. This is something which we have to control, or we should try to keep away from the traps of the shaitan. He always say to you that this £1,000, you can always be 2,000. You can always increase to 3,000. He will always try to trick you to go into illegal ways of earning money. So shaitan will be there at every corner. This the £10 note. You can have the shaitan even written on it. If you see the pictures on it, they are mostly shayateen and ins. And this is something which Allah is telling us in the Quran, that the shaitan will be there, always calling you to use that money unwisely, to spend it unwisely, and to waste it. Furthermore, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that try to be good with them, try to be nice with your with your relatives. But if for any reason the shaitan has made them an enemy to you, i.e. they are not replying to your da'wah, they are not replying to Islam, then what do? You turn away from them. وإما تعرضن عنهم ابتغاء رحمة من ربك ترجوها فقل لهم قولا. This is also talking about the saying, the destitute, those who are in your family, the needy and the wayfarers. If for the sake of Allah you have to turn away from them, and even then He doesn't tell us that be rash with them, don't be brash with them, don't be too firm with them. Rather, وَقُلْ لَهُمْ قَوْلًا مَيْسُورًا, speak with them with a spoken which is done with kindness and with mercy. Kindly, don't be brash, don't be harsh with them, don't be abusive towards them, even in this situation. This part of the ayah is referring to if some of your family members are not practicing Islam, they may be not as strong as you, and you find it difficult to keep that relationship with them. Then what do? Do you just turn away from them? And we have issues sometimes where brothers and sisters have either reverted to Islam or they become more practicing, and their parents are really becoming a hindrance. So this is really instructions for them that they should turn away from them, but again with mercy and with kindness. And when it comes to before we go to the next ayah 29 and 30, because this is really all talking about, remember one thing, that all these ayahs, has anything come in the form of ibadah? You don't see any ayah here talking about your salah. There is actually an ayah which is coming next, talks about sadaqah and zakat. But when it comes to the physical ibadah, there's no mention of it. Again, it's all about akhlaq, about your characters. And this is something which the Prophet ﷺ made sure that before they went to Medina, their akhlaq was at such a standard that they could face any sort of abuse, any sort of physical or mental hardship. This is really a lesson for all of us, that before we think about our physical ibadat, our emotional and spiritual level needs to be higher. Remember last week I spoke about the nafs and the physical state and the difference between the two. This is again talking more about the nafs and how we should train the nafs to such a degree that it is able to, when you are praying, you don't get distracted. So we hear brothers, they say that we get distracted by so-and-so in the back, he's sneezing. That means our nafs is not trained to a certain stage where we can ignore that. The Sahaba, when they used to get injured or when they used to have something, an operation, a mini operation, they would say to them, let me go into my salat and then you can do so-and-so. Because they knew that in the salat they are really in a different state of mind. They don't feel what's happening around them. Their body doesn't feel the same thing. So very, very important when we have the new brothers and sisters come to Islam, rather than straight away putting it on them that you must pray 5 times a day, you must pay zakat, you must go to Hajj, you must do this, you must do that. We give them the tazkiyatun nafs, give them the purification of the nafs. And this is something we know, the more materialistic we become, the more further away we are going from this. And this is something which the Prophet ﷺ himself spent nearly 10 years in the time in Mecca concentrating his effort upon this part.
Just a question.
Yes, sir.
What would you reckon if we have in a family like elder brother or sister, they're not practically, in Islam properly, and you just advise them to do it, namaz and zakat and stuff. How extent you can, because you opening really once, twice, 3 times, but then you opening something, a war with them or something, internally a family, they don't like you, they just like you always, you're giving me this advice. What would be the best way, really?
It's a good question, because the Prophet ﷺ, he made dua.
They are elders as well, you need to respect them as well. They are elder sisters and brothers, so that's another thing.
So the brother is asking about if you have family members who are probably, like I mentioned, who are not practicing the deen, at how far should you go in calling them to the da'wah. And I mentioned this a few weeks ago, that you should call them as long as things don't become physical. And as long as the relationship is going to deteriorate any further, then you stop. Then you don't press them further until they actually calm down. Because we know from the Sunnah that the Prophet ﷺ, when he used to call to the Islam, he didn't call, he called them to one thing, and that was to worship none but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, have mercy, give the rights to those who you should like. These ayahs are all the foundation of any family, of any community. This should be really the basics or the bunyad, the foundation. I know a lot of brothers or sisters, when you call them to the Islam, the first thing you tell them is that either stick to it or they run away from you. So there's two things. Rather than emphasizing on the physical ibadat, I think we need to always come back to how the Prophet ﷺ invited his own people, like Abu Talib, how how sorrowful he was, how in such a state that he died without saying the shahada. And this was something great on the Prophet ﷺ. This is really a test. This is really an example for all of us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to show us that even the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ didn't accept the invitation. So it could be that someone close to you that you could be practicing, but say for instance your partner, your children, or your other sort of siblings might not be as practicing. So what do? Do you just give up on them? No, rather you carry on, you give them da'wah, you slowly, steadily, through the akhlaq, through the... I would also say that the main thing is that you don't lose your cool, you don't lose your sabr, you don't become angry with them and say, oh, I've given up. Because I've seen other people, they've actually lost it with them and they've walked away from them. That's the worst thing you can do. Don't ever abandon them until they actually physically throw you out or have sanctions against you, which becomes a problem. So inshallah we'll come back to this point, which is a very, it fits in very, very nicely with how the Prophet ﷺ wanted to train the companions prior for the hijrah. We'll move on for the last two ayahs, then we'll have some questions if brothers have. The next two ayahs really are referring to rizq, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and going back to the question, the issue of rizq come in. So if you are in a situation where your parents, they throw you out, then the rizq is a problem. The rizq might be something which will be tight upon you. And Allah is telling us before we go to the rizq, إِنَّ رَبَّكَ يَبْسُطُ الرِّزْقَ لِمَنْ يَشَاءُ وَيَقْدِرُ. He's giving us more advice. And this is advice to those who have the money and those who don't have the money. Do not keep your hand fastened to your neck. And this is actually a word which is used in Arabic, which means to be tight-fisted. It means don't be stingy on your parents and also on your children. And neither be too open-handed, spending it with open hands, outspread it all together. There should be a balance between the two. Neither be too stingy or too wasteful in your spending. Otherwise, if you do this, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will leave you sitting, ridiculed and poor, destitute from what you are doing, so you think that by keeping money to yourself, you might become more rich. Rather, Allah is telling us it will be the opposite. You will become poorer in your iman, poorer in your mind. Psychologically, you will be so bogged down by this money. You will see people with millions and millions of pounds in their bank account. But can they spend it? No. Can they go to Hajj? No. Can they do anything good? No. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken that ability from them and He has made them poor in their morals, in their character. So poverty doesn't just mean the poverty of the mal, of the wealth. It means poverty in their characteristics, in their morals as well. And you'll also be maloom. You'll be rebuked in the society. And this is really a great lesson for us, that in the society of Medina, anybody who was stingy was looked upon down. He said, this person, what is he doing with all his money? Anybody who was wasteful was also looked down upon. That, look at this person, why is he spending so much? Here things have changed. So those who don't spend, who spend little, who try to keep to the limit, are looked down upon. They say, these people, why they're not spending money on their children? Rather, those who are spending a lot, i.e. on weddings, on cars, on things which they probably don't need, they are looked up as role models. And this is something which I touched upon yesterday in the Jummah Bayan, that our youngsters have bad role models. They have role models of people driving fancy cars, having jewelry, and having mobile phones. This is the role models they have. So people who spend a lot, they are looked upon that these are the people who we should be alike. And this is something which is opposite to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to advise us in Surah Bani Israel. So again, the provisions which we have been given, they are from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He finishes off these ayahs by a great ayah, Inna Rabbaka yabsut. This ayah is repeated many times in the Quran. Inna Rabbaka yabsutu rizqa liman yasha wa yaqdir, innahu kana bi'ibadihi khabiran basira. Verily, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is able to provide you with plentifulness. Yeah, to whom He wants. Whether He is a Muslim, whether He is a non-Muslim, whether He is a male or a female, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He wills, He will give to whom He wants. And also the opposite side of that, He is also able to keep behind to some people. To some He might give a lot, to others He might keep away from. And this is really from His hikmah, that why does He give to some people and why does He not give to others? This is something which we shouldn't question, rather we should be thankful. And if He has given us plentiful to spend, we should try to spend that in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if He has given us little, then we should make dua that, oh Allah, give us more, give me more, so that I can spend in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that I can spend on my children, I can spend on my family, and I can spend in the halal. This should be our dua, that when we are asking for more, we should always ask for more in order to make us better Muslims, better citizens of this ummah, and rather than we could do good. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this hadith I mentioned yesterday, that al-mu'min al-qawi khayrun min al-mu'min al-da'if, the strong Muslim, whether he's physically strong, whether he is got, financially he's strong, is better than a weak Muslim. And we see that many of the history is in front of us, that most of the Sahabas were poor. Not many of them had businesses apart from Uthman, Ammar, all these famous Sahabas which we know about. They were very famous in their business transactions. But this didn't, detract them from the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Where the problem lies, when does the mal and the awlad become a fitna, is when it is actually distracting you from the ibadat, when it is making you pray less, when it is keeping you away from paying charity. And this fear, this really a scary scene, that when you have somebody who is wealthy and he refused to give charity. And what did Abu Bakr declare against him? He declared a war against this person because he's denying one of the fara'id of the Islam, one of the obligatory parts. This is zakat. We have people nowadays who denounce and who deny the obligation of salat, who deny and denounce the obligation of, say, getting married, etc. All these sunnahs of the Prophet ﷺ, they deny it, and they say that these were all for that time, and things have changed differently now. So this is something we have to be very, very careful in our lives. And I'll finish off by one of the sayings of the Prophet ﷺ regarding Uwais al-Qadi, where he says to Ali and Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, that say to them that there was one deed, and the ulama, they differ which deed was this that he was referring to. There was one deed which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted whatever bad you did in your life, whether you did any bad, and He recompensated you for them, good for you in the hereafter. And again, I mentioned the one of the deeds which he did was the khidmah, the looking after of his mother. And also another thing which he used to do, which is again relating to yesterday's bayan, he used to earn his own living with his own hands. And he never used to ask other people for any sort of wealth. And this is a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that if you are poor, but yet you don't ask other people for help, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you the reward in this life and also the hereafter. If you were to ask someone for money, then He will just give you one reward in the hereafter. Rather than giving you the two rewards, He will just give you the one reward for asking someone, and that your reason has been fulfilled by this person. I'll finish off by a couple of the hadith which I haven't been able to read to you in the Tafseer ibn Kathir regarding the issue of faqr. Yeah, so when somebody is given poverty by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is the hadith which I just mentioned, that whoever is afflicted with poverty and he goes around to ask from people, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never get rid of his poverty. This is the hadith. But then if he asks Allah for help, then Allah will grant him the means of independence sooner or later. Yeah, this was recorded in Sunan al-Tirmidhi and Abu Dawood, who said this hadith is Hasan. And what we get from this, that always you should be independent in your adab, in your akhlaq, in your business transactions. You should never think that this person has any benefit from me unless it is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Never rely on people, rather rely on the one who people rely on, and that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the ability to understand what has been said, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those who have still parents still alive, this is really a final advice to all of you, that do whatever you can to please them in this dunya, even if it is, even if you are right and they are saying that you are wrong, just admit it and say, yeah, I am wrong, just for the sake of that argument, because we see a lot of time. We had a sister, she phoned a few weeks ago, and she was wronged, and she was clearly wronged in her affairs. She was wronged in her inheritance, and she says to me that, my father is really, pressing on this case. What do I do? I said to her, sister, for the sake of the argument, just accept it, that you are wrong. Even though you might be right, I said, let the issue pass, because your father is in a bad state. He's on his deathbed, and he is, refusing to give you your share. I said, just give up your share. And I said, you will find things will become better for you when, when things get easier for you. Alhamdulillah, it happened that her father, reconciled with her, and she reconciled with her father. And in the end, he also gave her her share. Just by admitting that, I am wrong, father, just forgive me, he was able to, open his heart to her, and he was able to give her her share. So this is really from the sunnah, that we should always, be able, be the ones who forgive, rather than waiting for others to forgive us. We always think that the shaitan is there, he's there, you are right, you are the younger brother, you are the elder brother, you have more right to this estate, why don't you do it so and so? And he just takes you for a ride. He actually takes you for a ride which is never ending. The Prophet ﷺ said Ameen as well. And I'll finish on this point. He made Ameen. To what? What did he make Ameen to? Does anyone remember the hadith of Jibreel? There are 4 or 5 things which were mentioned when he was climbing onto the member. And Jibreel came to him and he makes bad dua. He makes dua that if somebody, oh Muhammad, he is doomed or she is doomed, who hears your name mentioned and does not say sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So this is something we should always repeat. And he said to Muhammad, Muhammad, say Ameen. So I said Ameen. Then he said that he is doomed or she is doomed who sees the month of Ramadan. And the month of Ramadan is around the corner. When the month of Rajab and Sha'ban appear, then Ramadan is soon. Because these 2 months, the Prophet ﷺ made dua that, oh Allah, bless me in the month of Rajab and Sha'ban and allow me to reach the month of Ramadan. This is the dua which he used to, even though the transmission is weak, but this is a great dua to make. So he said that doomed is the one who sees the month of Ramadan